Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Brand Pitch. Today I'm joined by Simon Mason from Mercian Hockey. You might know Simon as the voice of international hockey, as he is often on the commentary teams, especially around major events. Not to mention that he used to be the GB Goalkeeper for many years. In this interview we talk about how he got involved in Mercian at a young age, how Mercian has developed over time, and we also get to talk about not only their sticks but also their goalkeeping products, which he's very passionate about. We talk a little bit about what they look for in sponsorship and how they make the decision of who to take on. And we also talk a little bit around the upcoming Olympics and hockey coverage in general. If you do enjoy these episodes, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment of anyone you want to see appear in future episodes. And if you want to support a little bit further, you can support me on Patreon or through my website, which is bossfhockey.com. It starts from as little as £1 a month, and it really helps me cover the cost of things like interviews, pitch bookings for reviews, and also giveaways. Now on to the episode. So today I am joined by Simon Mason. You may know him as the voice of hockey, but he is also the owner-operator of Mercian. Thank you for joining me, Simon.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat.
Mercian is one of the, I think, longest surviving hockey brands. I think you've just gone past 50 years, if I'm right.
This is our 50th year, and there's a little bit of pub argument conversation about whether this is 49, 50, or 51 based on when the company was incorporated. But yeah, we've been around for a while. Let's leave it as that. It's like asking a lady her age. We're kind of probably solidly middle-aged. Yes.
I'm really interested to hear your answer as to what you think Mercian does differently that's given you that longevity in the hockey market.
Wow, that's a big question. I think in the beginning, because we were one of the first starters, I mean, if you go back to when the company was started, so you go back mid-70s through to probably late 80s, we were probably one of only a dozen real brands. The knowledge for the brand, the founder, a gentleman called Mike Smith, he started it. He came out of the marketing department of Slazinger's at the time. He knew sport. He was a hockey player, well-established hockey player, Staines Hockey Club down the road from where the company was started. And he knew about hockey. And there's some fabulous stories that I won't necessarily bore you with about sending friends off by road to India to get the first batch of sticks. A guy in a camper van took 3 months to get there. But he knew his sport and he knew marketing, and he started the company at a time when there wasn't a lot of competition. The world was a lot bigger than it is now. It was difficult to get product, and therefore he was in a nice little sweet spot. He was also in the southeast of England, where disposable income was greater than other parts of the country, and so the brand flourished and grew. And you also had a huge amount of independent sports shops at that time. The internet wasn't there, and so for probably the first 20, maybe even 25 years of the company's existence, it was relatively untroubled, and it performed well as I'm going to say as a lifestyle brand. There wasn't a massive global growth. Probably actually that's not fair. Probably it's the early 90s really when things started to change a little bit. Then, I mean, the internet then boomed, the ability to get product in a short space of time, change things, e-commerce selling, mail order selling, all of which Mercian had bits and pieces of involvement with. But there was a degree of stagnation, stable stagnation, but stagnation as more brands came into the market, sort of late 90s really. And then from the early 2000s, there was an injection of younger people into the company. So I got involved, the guy that I work with still today, Geraint Hughes, got involved, Mike and Judy Smith's son got involved kind of 2004, 2005. And it just changed a little bit of the focus. There was greater digitization of the company. There was a little bit more energy in the selling sphere, the ability to communicate globally. And so we created a really nice, solid network in that kind of early 2000s period. And that stability has been what has got us to this point. Mike always used to say to me that explosions are simply dangerous for everybody. Not many people come out well out of an explosion. So explosive growth, explosive change, and explosions in general, but explosive growth certainly is a dangerous thing. You can overexpand and actually be a victim of your own success. And so he always counseled about having stable plans, well thought out initiatives, that have put us in a good place. Does it mean that some companies have come past us? Yes, because they have gambled on a higher risk and return strategy. And we can talk about that far more as we go into the conversation later. But that growth through those early 2000s was the platform from which we now survive. We lost our way, by my own admission. We lost our way probably late to sort of 2010, 11, 12, 13 maybe, when multiple brands were coming in. You really then had this influx where the number of brands in the world probably went from 50 to 150 in 4 or 5 years, and it felt like everybody was selling a stick out the back of their car. And we missed that. We weren't sure, did we want to be a historic brand with a new up and coming fashion, fast starting ethos? Did we want to just be a middle of the road hockey brand? And there wasn't a lot of clarity about it. And we lost our way a little bit. And then we were really fortunate. I was really fortunate in 2015 when a colleague poked me very, very hard several times in a variety of meetings and said, you need to rebrand. And we ended up rebranding, and we used an agency to rebrand, something that we definitely couldn't afford to do at the time. We gambled a little bit, and we got a huge amount of value from it, which gave us a real upturn, global upturn in sales, because it gave us a story that we could hang ourselves on, positively hang ourselves on. And then the pandemic was the second reason why we are where we are now, because faced with extinction, for want of a better word, we took a gamble. I put a note out on LinkedIn saying, we're thinking about the identity of our product range. Does anybody want to play with 2.5 pence? Because we got no money, but we got a grant from Surrey Council, and we thought we'd invest it a little bit. So we did, and we ended up with a massive number. Almost 20 companies reached out against the brief that I wrote on LinkedIn, and we ended up shortlisting and interviewing, and we ended up with a company called Interstate, whose impact has fundamentally shifted how we approach the marketplace and understand who we are. They created an identity for us, so we're really clear now on how we operate and why we do what we do. So from a potted history perspective, it's been about considered growth, a little bit of luck, and then realizing that we have to work with external agencies to do the stuff that we don't know what we're doing as well as they do. And that's quite difficult, because I always term it, when you work with an agency, that you spend a lot of money for a fancy PowerPoint. And essentially that's what marketing is to some degree. But it's what sits behind it. It's the theory and knowledge. So now everybody in the business is clear, and it's a story that we can tell globally, that means that our global customers, more so than our UK customers, understand where we sit in the marketplace, and that gives you something really positive and powerful to sell off the back of.
I find that really interesting when you talk about trying to be strategic and not gambling on stuff, because historically, going back, I always think of Mercian as being a real innovative brand. So I remember growing up when you launched, for example, the Great White Oxide and the Great Black Stick. The Great Black Stick was supposed to be near indestructible in hockey. The Great White Oxide had the hardened coating to make it more protective. I remember you bringing out, I think, the first hex-shaped handle on a stick, and I want to say it was called the Fire or the Lava, with the vibration dampening. So I find it interesting that you say about trying to be really measured and not gambling, and yet also being really innovative with your product. How do you balance those two concepts?
I think there's two really different things there, because there is technical innovation that means that, so historically we worked with, before we started chatting, we talked about the fact that people throw around this statement that all sticks are the same. There's only 7 factories in Pakistan that make them. That's fundamentally untrue, because there are multiple different factories. What there are is a few good factories who use top quality materials, the best resins in the world, and the blend of materials makes very, very good quality sticks. Outside of that, there's a whole load of people that use local carbons and resins and glue some stuff together that falls apart pretty quickly. We were lucky in late 1998, 1999. Awan Sports is the biggest factory. That is the name of the factory that make multiple brands in the world, and they are superb. They did a deal with TK and Grays at that point when all of the other brands that were with them essentially were kicked out. We were one of those brands who originally were with Awan. At that time, Mike Smith had some samples on his desk for some other hockey sticks from a small, I'm going to call it a boutique factory. And faced with this problem with Awan, himself and myself went out there on a trip, and we met these guys, loved what they did, loved the quality of the samples, and we decided that rather than taking any gambles, we would invest in them. So we now have a partnership with our production facility, which means that we have control of materials and quality and production, all that kind of thing, which has stood as Igor said, and we have never made any Mercian sticks, composite sticks, anywhere else for the last 23.5 years. And what that does is that gives us a technical insight into the products we make. So we can be innovative, don't get me wrong, we can be innovative, we can bring in new materials, we can understand how a Kevlar weave has to be interlaid into carbon to reduce brittleness, and we can put things like piezoelectric fibers, we can put the hardened tungsten carbide coating that you were talking about from the great white oxide, we can put those things into products. But that to me isn't a gamble, because what you've done is you've done your market research, you know what the product is you're bringing to market. And so even if it doesn't make a positive sales impact, so nobody likes the idea, you're not going to make a bad stick. So it's not going to damage your brand. It's not going to damage the sales. So our investment was always based on high quality product into a marketplace that we knew we could sell. When I say we're quite, I'm going to say considered and conservative, I'm not going to burn thousands and tens of thousands of pounds on unquantifiables. So if I look at social media where we are now, some of the companies that people see as the biggest companies in the world have burned thousands and millions of pounds, euros, dollars to buy brand space without any kind of guarantee of selling product off the back of it. And that to me is a bigger gamble. So if I invest £100,000 to do a social media campaign in the hope it's going to sell me £200,000 worth of sticks, that's a gamble because there's no outcome from that. Whereas if I buy £100,000 worth of sticks, I know I'm going to sell them in a particular period. So there's kind of no gamble other than the economics of a cash flow position. So that's what I mean by that's what I mean was a considered approach rather than a high risk one.
So, as you've just mentioned, we had a little chat beforehand talking about when people talk about sticks and manufacturing processes. Your website is one of the most transparent places in terms of the technologies that you use, the manufacturing process you use. Is that part of your new Mercian identity to have that transparency so people can see what they're buying into with your products?
Short answer is yes, but I think it's beyond that. I think it's a company transparency. There's a huge amount of smoke and mirrors in a lot of different industries, and I get very frustrated when somebody asks a question and the question doesn't get answered. And so politics is a great example of shouting at the television, going, "Well, hang on, that's not what was actually asked." And for me, we are a technical brand, therefore we have to display our technical knowledge, and we have to display technical knowledge in a way that is quantifiable and cost-based and all sorts of things. So if we look at the price of sticks that come out of factories, you can justify stick pricing up to probably £300 from a UK perspective at full retail price. Once you go beyond that, you're talking about the use of very, very specialized niche materials in order to justify the technical components that then put a £350 or a £400 price tag on a stick. It's different if you're one of the big brands. I'll use Addy as an example because some of their sticks are now £380, £390. But you've got 3 stripes on a stick, you've got marketing agencies, you've got license fees, you've got a different global commercial structure that probably pushes those prices up. But going back to from a Mercian perspective, it has to be transparent. We have to create trust and respect in the marketplace by being credible. And that's about breakage rates that globally, for me right now, they sit underneath 2%. Our sticks break globally based on the sales data that we get from all of our agencies, and they get listed. So breakages, when they come back into the business, they get listed. Where does the stick break? Is it in the handle? Is it in the shaft? Is it in the head? And that data is then kept as a reference point to go back to the factory and go, this batch of sticks did this. We haven't had to do a product recall for about 20 years. We did on the old hammerheads a long time ago. We had a batch of 200 and they all broke in the handle. And they broke in the handle because when we took the grips off, we realized that a new worker in the factory, and this is the sort of information, is that when you create a composite stick, because it's made by hand, if you don't overlay plates of carbon, you create them, you put them end to end, you create a fracture point. So what had happened was that a worker improperly trained in the factory laid carbon plates end to end because he thought he didn't need to overlap them. And literally that stress point was at the bottom of the hitting position on the stick. So when you hit a ball, they all snapped. And we had so many back that we just basically recalled all 200 because they're all batch written on the handles, recalled them all back, replaced them all, and then reported that to the factory. They then replaced them to us because that's a proper quality QC process, quality control process that exists, because you can then track why there'd be a break. And that, again, there are problems. Stuff breaks. There might be a production issue. There might be a batch of resin. There might be an issue with some carbon fiber. And quite often you can get to the bottom of it. But that transparency gives us accountability. But that accountability, I believe, generates a degree of respect and a degree of awareness of the competence that we try and put into the products that we make.
With that kind of transparency, how much of that do you think other brands should be broadcasting? Things like return rates. Do you think that is something that could be useful for the public?
Other brands have to make their own choices about how they sell, what's their raison d'etre for being. Return rates help the public. Yeah, sure. If everybody published the same kind of data, you would then have a metric by which to establish what's the best brand. But that definition can be flexed in so many different ways. I think all you can ever do, this was a little bit of philosophy. If I go back 10 years when, and I'll use two brands in particular. So when Osaka first burst onto the stage, and they were the brand that fundamentally changed sports hockey marketing massively. And they were sponsoring a lot of the world's top players, and they had their Land Rovers with discos in the back and shipping players off around the world. However, and at that point, I was just like, how can we compete? How are they doing this? They can't be selling enough sticks. The maths doesn't add up. And it's only now, with a little bit of availability of financial data and various things, you understand what that economic model looked like. And if I'd done that with Mercian, we'd have been bust because there was no personal financial backing behind it. And the Osaka model, from everything that I've read and heard, there was personal financial backing that allowed that to happen. And therefore, they burst onto the stage. They built themselves a market niche, and it changed how people looked at hockey sticks. Suddenly it was the ability to be cool. And then you get a lot of pop-ups is unfair, but you get new brands, disruptor brands, who see that as a model, and they go into different countries, and there's several of them. And I admire massively now what young ones have done. Young ones are the new Osaka, without a shadow of a doubt. They are marketable. They're seen on fields around the world. They are the name that's on everybody's lips in terms of the marketed hockey brand right now. And I don't think it's unreasonable. People always, when I'm open like this, people go, "Oh, you're selling someone else's brand." I said, "No, I'm not. That's the reality. There's no point hiding from it." But to my mind, they are selling an identity, whereas I'm selling a product. And I'm really clear on what that is. I can't be young ones because I'm 51. Sit behind my desk as a middle-class male going, I don't understand TikTok sales and that kind of thing. Personally, I can learn, and my team here know about it, but that's not where we are. What we're about is the established customer base that we have, trying to build incremental sales and create a positive message about, you buy this product because it's great and it works and it doesn't break and it's repeatable in terms of, you buy one, it's good, you buy the second one, it's also good. It's not just a pop-up it's lovely for 6 months, and it breaks and you go somewhere else. So to go back to your question, would that data be useful? I don't know whether the public think it's useful. I do. And when I'm asked about it and how our products are made, I will always share that, because there's no reason not to. It's a bit like people when they talk about if you always tell the truth, you've never got to remember what you say. The minute that you start trying to cloud stuff or be clever and say, oh, it's this, that, and the other. I'll use as another example of a brand. There was a brand that had graphene in their sticks. Now, graphene, to work from a composite material perspective, is a single atom layer that is invisible to the human eye. I wonder how that translates into being a feature of a hockey stick. I'm like, well, because I can't find any technical information about how it can work in product, but it was in tennis, it's been in hockey sticks. But if you compare that to when golf balls started talking about having titanium oxide in them, what that was a plastic with a sprinkling of titanium oxide power, because the golf public perception was that you then had a metallicized golf ball with a metallic driver and it would then go further. Complete marketing guff. That's all it was. It was a sprinkling of oxide into a big pot of plastic. So you then go, well, how do I justify that if somebody wants to pull it apart? And the one thing people can't do with the information that exists about our products, and it goes into the goalkeeping as well, that you can't pull apart the technical features that exist because they are chemically, physically identifiable. And sometimes that means they're not as exciting or as pretty as other stuff, but they work really well. And I'm happy to base our company around that.
And you touched on it there, so we'll just quickly jump across. Obviously, a topic that's near to your heart is the Mercian goalkeeping range. Obviously, there's Obo is kind of the market leader in the goalkeeping space. What are you doing with Mercian to kind of move into that space and try and edge Obo out of that kind of top spot?
To respond to the last sentence first, I don't think we will ever nudge Obo out of that top spot unless something significantly changes in the world of hockey. The reason for that is they changed the market when they came into it, late 80s, early 90s. They offered me a set of Obo kit at the Junior World Cup in 1992. I turned down because I was happy with Mercian, and I didn't ever and haven't ever used anything else prior to giving up goalkeeping. They changed how goalkeeping materials were viewed, and they took the market by storm, and they now probably globally account for, I'm going to suggest, between 75 and 80% of the global market. And the rest of us then were all about playing catch up. And to some degree, from a marketing perspective, we're playing catch up. They have 88 color variants. For my top set of kit, I've got one. You do it in red. that's the current color range. And we sell as much of that line of kit as we can bring into the warehouse. It comes and it goes as fast as possible. And it's a significant part of our global revenue. We made a decision probably 15 years ago now that we would move all of our goalkeeping foam production from India back to the UK. So it's all made in the UK. It's made by a guy in Reading. He was part of, or was the reason behind, the very first foam moon boots that were worn by Ian Taylor in 1988 were developed here for Slazenger. And he is an ex-head of physics. I'm not going to mention his name at this point in case he doesn't want me to mention him on a podcast, but he basically is solely responsible for probably the second highest volume of goalkeeping equipment in the world. He makes for 3 or 4 brands. And the reason we sell as much as we sell is because it works. It is as good as, if not better, from a protection, rebound, and weight perspective as anything else in the world. It's used by goalkeepers that you will know of and about, and we'll have a number of them on Olympic pitches. Ollie Payne, from this perspective, as a British conversation, is going to be there with Great Britain. We've got both French goalkeepers. We've got one of the German goalkeepers of the pair, Alex Stadler, who's been with us for ages. We've got Gowan Jones, all sorts of proper top-end goalkeepers using stuff. And they don't use it because I've got the biggest checkbook, and international players do get paid. They use it because it works, and we have goalkeepers transitioning from probably every other brand on the planet into our stuff because it does a job. And it goes back to the same conversation about the sticks, is it's a constant tiny percentage evolution of tweaking this, tweaking that. So this year's kicker is different to last year's kicker, not in a way that you can necessarily see visibly, but we might have changed the density of the foam by 5%. We might have moved a plastic insert by 2 centimeters, all of which because it is feedback. And I have a WhatsApp group on my phone with 20 goalkeepers across the world who feedback if they have a break, if they have an injury, if they have a bruise, if they have anything. It gets fed back onto the group, it goes straight into the factory, and then we try and adjust stuff to cope with it. So again, it's about making really, really, really good quality kit. But at the other end of that performance spectrum, if you go to the junior stuff, it's about making affordable, durable, playable stuff that doesn't bankrupt the clubs or individuals who work really hard to make sure that every penny they spend, they get value from.
So you've mentioned that you only do one colour variant, but you don't. You also have a white.
There's a depth of research. Well done. Yes, we do. That was done as an experiment because Alex Stadler, the German goalkeeper, probably 2 seasons ago now, said, I want something different to play internationally in. So he was playing in red in his domestic league stuff and said, could we do anything? So we went to the factory and we had to get higher specification material. White was only available in a specification that was essentially about 10% more protective, but it was fractionally heavier. But the type of goalkeepers who were using it can manage with that additional weight. We did a set for him that turned into 3 or 4 sets for different goalkeepers who were like, oh, I want some of that, I want some of that. Unbeknown to me, the factory had bought a block of material to make that order, and it had just sat. And then the guy came back to me, he was changing his storage facility. He went, oh, I've got this stuff that's still around. Can we make some sets with it? And it was enough foam for 5 sets. I was like, well, I'll tell you what, we'll put some pictures out on Facebook, the beauty of Facebook, see if we can just clear the old foam and we'll get stuff done. So I stuck some pictures on Facebook, on my Facebook, my personal one. It wasn't even on a corporate page. And we sold all 5 sets in 47 minutes. I was like, well, if that happens, then maybe we should do some more. And so we opened it up and it was about a 3-day window in the end. We didn't want to get carried away. So a 3-day window, and that turned into 23 full top end sets of goalkeeper kit, which funnily enough, I've picked up this morning from the factory. And so they'll be going out over the next couple of weeks. So yes, every now and again, we do occasional bits, but we don't do them from a specific corporate perspective because the stock holding to have different materials is big, it's bulky. So the fact is that if we're selling as much as we can sell in a single color, commercially the argument is if you did 2 colors, would you sell twice as much or an extra 50%? But right now that's not something we need to do. Again, it goes back to the conversation about what do we invest in, and we need fast turnover product, and it's big and it's bulky, it's expensive. So yeah, we do what we do. And occasionally, you're absolutely right, great research, we play with a different color.
And is that something that we could see more of in the future, this limited window? Let's say next you decide you're going to do blue foam for someone, pre-order, we have 10 sets available.
Yes, is the answer to your question. Yeah, very much so. And if you read, I love reading sort of marketing data, and not data, that's the wrong phrase, concepts from other industries, and you look at the desire for personalization. You look at Nike's embroidered trainers, and you can make multiple different colors and you can get your initials embroidered on them, and people want something that's a little bit personalized. They don't want something that their friends have necessarily got. So yes, we will definitely do variants of a theme. We won't stock long blocks of product. We will definitely look at, do we do that in a blue? Do we do that in a green? We will be limited by the colors of the materials that are available, and that's an interesting dilemma, because the materials that are used for goalkeeping, whilst in my mind we are a relatively big user of foam, the sort of foam that is being used in the aeronautical industries, it's being used in packaging, and the companies that make that material, and the best material is made here in the UK, That's not me being big about the UK. It's just that is actually industrially a recognised fact. It's made here in the UK and it's amazing, but they could happily run their business just from making black foam. And so we have a constant fight with, can you make us some white? Can you make us some red? Can you make us some blue? And you're talking about they make a container of coloured foam at a time. Now, a container of coloured foam is enough for between 400 and 500 pairs of leg guards. So if you're going to gamble and make pink, you've got to know that you're going to sell a lot of pink. So yeah, I mean, quite often it's about partnering with other sporting projects and brands and doing things with other people. And so we have a nice little manufacturing group that we talk to about is somebody making, I'll stay with pink swimming floats. And if they are, the specification of that foam is something that we can piggyback as an inner for a leg guard. So you're constantly having these conversations about what the future colorways and designs could look like. But predominantly the discussion is always about the skeletal stability, rigidity, and what the performance is.
Okay, interesting. On that kind of customization, so obviously with foam equipment, you've got to get the colored foam. You can't just buy white and spray paint it like you can with other stuff. Where do you sit? And this is maybe crossing over away from being a brand owner to just a goalkeeper, around the helmet customization that we've seen. So people having things spray painted onto their helmets, different color combinations. The most well known is probably Maddie Hinch with the Red Bull helmet, although there's a few other goalkeepers that are now Red Bull sponsors that have a similar setup. How do you feel about that going into things like the Olympics, where obviously branding is as contained as they can do it?
I love it. I think any opportunity for an athlete to portray themselves in a unique manner. If we're looking at some of the commercial arrangements, to be open from a brand perspective, we run several sponsorship programs, contracted players where they use our goalkeeping material. I'll use Ollie Payne as an example. They use our goalkeeping materials, but he uses a stick from a different brand. And he came to me and said, look, I'm being offered X to use a different brand of stick. And I was a player for a long time, earning very, very little, but with the benefit of kind of getting to that Olympic level. And with a recognition of that, if I turned around to him and said, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen as a brand owner, then I'm just kind of making a bad feeling for myself, because you're not talking about enough money for it to have any sort of commercial impact. So allowing players to have a relaxed contract on one hand to use a different stick when they're using our goalkeeping, etc., to me is just fair and reasonable. And off the back of that, therefore, if players are looking to make a living out of something, if Red Bull are going to pay Maddie, we'll use that as an example, are going to pay Maddie a fee to have a helmet that's painted in those colors because that has a commercial value to them, crack on. However, if that's just a club goalkeeper on a Saturday afternoon who wants to spray paint their helmet red, white, and blue, Red Bull colours, mirror Maddie Hinch as kind of one of the iconic goalkeepers of the world in the past 10 years, great, do so. Literally link in with anybody who can do it. If you're going to do it, I mean, from a health and safety perspective, please make sure that you speak to someone who knows what they're doing, because you don't want to melt the plastic of your helmet with the wrong paint. But I love all that individualism, and you do tend to find that goalkeepers are a little bit more nutty than other people. So there is quite a lot of that in the marketplace. But yeah, I think it's great.
Is that another potential future revenue? Mercian will customize the helmet for you if you you pay us the right amount of money.
No, because it's no, because A, takes a huge amount of technical knowledge that we don't have. So it's not something that we could automatically do. We'd have to learn. And B, it is a very labor intensive, creative, almost labor of love project. And so the people that do it for a different reason. So if I have Mercian helmets, as I do, if somebody's using a Mercian helmet that's already got Mercian branding on it, I don't have a visible, identifiable corporate color. So I don't have the blue and silver of a Red Bull, for example. So there's no there's no advantage to me getting involved with that from a company perspective, because it won't ever generate enough revenue to make a move the needle commercially for us. I love the idea, but no, if it was anything, then I might look at it from the retail business that we're a part of. I might look at that, but even then it would have to have a pretty big impact on us as a business in some way. So right now, no. Simple answer.
No, that's a fair answer, to be fair. So within the products that you offer, what do you think has been the most important technical innovation that you've either brought to market or helped to bring to market?
I think the two things that I would like to highlight. One is the construction of the foam goalkeeping material that we make. That from the materials themselves generate the performance characteristics. So they generate the protection, they generate the rebound, they're lightweight, so they have the mobility. But it's how they're made, it's how that foam is essentially stuck together without using glue. And the process that goes through means that essentially, whilst you have a multi-laminated product, it behaves as if it was a single piece of foam. So the ability for it to tear, to rip, to fall apart doesn't exist. If I use it as an example, the old foam that we used to make, and we used to get it from the Asian subcontinent, it was two pieces of foam glued together. The minute that you put that element into either high or super high, super low temperatures, is the glue fails. So when a ball hits it, if it's in high temperature, the glue has started to melt, and therefore the pressure on the laminate of a ball impact pops it apart, so nothing holds it together. In super cold temperatures, that resin then freezes, ball hits it, resin shatters, it falls apart. So either one of those two performance extremes mean that product then fails. So bringing stuff back to the UK and making it in the way we now do essentially creates a single foam unit that can't fail, so it can't pull apart. I would challenge even someone of your strength with two pieces of foam that was melded together in the way that we do it to then go, right, now pull that apart. You would essentially be trying to rip a single piece of foam. So from a durability of a high performance product, I think that has made a single massive difference. And I think our customers, both retail and end user, respect that. From a stick perspective, I think that understanding the blend of materials that creates, way back when I was a youngster, there used to be a car advert for Volkswagen. And it's a bit like the beer advert of reassuringly expensive, but it was all about the noise that the door made when it shut. And it wasn't about the clang of a cheaper model car as they perceived it. It was a satisfying thud. And for me, when you'll know this as a product tester with the knowledge that you have, when you hit a hockey ball with a hockey stick, you can immediately tell the quality of materials by the noise it makes. If it's a horrible ting and it vibrates all the way up your arms, you know that you've got a product that's been made with second-rate materials, probably not processed particularly well. So for me, understanding a blend of vibration control materials such as a piezoelectric fiber, which is an active molecule compound, how you then interlayer fiberglass with carbon and with Kevlar, so you don't just get a super stiff stick, you actually get a super stiff stick that has some playability in it. That knowledge, I think, in the products, and it goes all the way back, and you mentioned it right at the beginning, it goes all the way back to the Great Black. The Great Black that we brought out was the stiffest hockey stick we'd ever made, and yet it didn't feel super stiff. It hit a ball incredibly hard, but because of the nature of the materials that existed within it, it had the durability. So we made that claim. We made the claim it was an unbreakable hockey stick. I had to withdraw that claim from a marketing perspective when one was sent back to me in two pieces. However, it did have tire tracks up it because it came back with a note saying, no, it's not. I was like, well, if you're going to drive over it, then so be it. But unbreakable in the course of normal hockey, but people will always try and pull something apart. So to me, for us, actually, it's been the evolution of material science in our products. So I wouldn't put my finger on any given product from a stick perspective. What I would put my finger on is material knowledge that means there is this constant evolution of high quality product is essentially akin to that satisfying thud of a really high quality stick hitting a ball hard, but with a degree of playability that means it sits really nicely technically in the marketplace.
Interesting. And so, what is your favourite stick to use out of the Mercian range currently?
Oh, right now, as a England over 50s veteran fullback, I'm not sure that my performance should gauge anything. However, out of choice, I use the CKF 90 Extreme Bend. So it's a 90% carbon stick with a 5% Kevlar and fiberglass mix, and it has, because I am tall and have long limbs at masters level, if you could try and pretend to drag flick it or learn something like a drag flick and miss a similarly aging veteran goalkeeper, then you can score some goals. So I decided I would try and learn that, which meant I needed something with a not an extreme low bend, but a pretty close to extreme low bend. So the extreme bend that we make has that super low bow. It has a little shaft scoop, so not a head scoop, not a face scoop. It's a nice flat face head, but it's got a shaft scoop for the whole drag flicking thing. It's got a little flattened backhand edge, which if I can occasionally get low enough to bunt a pass on the backhand, it works. And it's just got a little twist to the head with a really nice fine toe. So from trying to throw some overheads, albeit relatively short ones, that kind of works. So it's a nice hybrid of several things without the super stiffness of either a 95 or, well, I don't believe you can have a 100% carbon stick because you've got to have something else in it to moderate the carbon. But the really, really high carbon sticks, it's not got that. I'm not a hitter. I reckon I hit a ball about 10 times a year, so there's no point having super powerful sticks. I've not got the touch and feel, but yeah, so my personal choice at the moment is a 37.5-inch CKF 90 with an extreme bend.
I mean, as an ex-international goalkeeper, the thing that probably surprised me the most was that it wasn't like a 38 or a 40-inch stick.
No, I've not got the control for that. The 37, despite the fact I'm nigh on 6'5", my body still works reasonably well because I haven't run around like all my peer group did, and therefore kind of I've still got both knees and both hips and a degree of flexibility, so I can get away with 37.5. Anything longer than that, it feels like a golf driver in my hands, and I'm pretty rubbish with a golf driver, so I'll stay with what I can control.
One of my favourite questions to ask is, what do you think that Mercian does that doesn't get as much kind of praise, for lack of better terminology? So something you think you do really well that kind of goes unnoticed in the market.
I think it's what you have kindly highlighted, which is transparency and knowledge and information. I think we now, these days particularly, we live in a fast-paced, instant gratification world that is very much about, is it sexy and cool? Has an influencer got it in their hands? How much are we seeing this product on billboards and in pictures and in magazines? And that's the cold reality of where we sit commercially right now. I'm sorry, the world sits commercially right now, and therefore I think that there is a lack of is it a lack of desire, either a lack of desire, maybe a lack of time in terms of finding out more details about products, and people buy on first look. And the internet is a fabulous thing, but I still get a little bit confused as to why somebody would buy a £200 hockey stick on the internet when every hockey stick is made by a man, and is a man. It is a male-dominated society out in the Indian subcontinent, so the Asian subcontinent. They're made by hand, and therefore the weight balance, the pickup, the feel of a high-quality performance product in your hand is fundamentally different from stick to stick. Okay, if you've always bought the stable technical thing, which my master's friends talk about, if you've always bought a Graves GR7000, you can go and buy a Graves GR7000. You can buy it online, and it'll be similar enough to play with. But if you're thinking about buying a different stick, a new stick, something that is a different brand or a different quality, then going and feeling it, if you're going to invest a lot of money, if it's less than 100 quid, then fine. I'm using that as just a simple threshold. Then you'll get something that'll work okay. But if you're going beyond that and you're going to want to touch a ball 100 times a game, 200 times a training session for a whole season, surely it's worth a couple of hours in a car to go and find something that is actually suitable in your hand. And I think there, but I don't think that happens as much as I would like. And from a purely philosophical perspective, I would love people to spend a little bit more time exploring the technical components of product, because I think we sit really well in that marketplace, but it's quite a difficult story to tell because it's a long story, as you'll gather from my answers. Teaching people about that product quality isn't an immediate one word Instagram, TikTok-esque thing. It takes a little bit of time. And that's, I don't think we necessarily get the credit for the quality of the product we make sometimes. I'm not bemoaning that. That is our choice. Going back to what I said about us as a brand, we will stand behind the technical quality of our product because it's quite difficult to then translate that story into an Instagram reel. If someone's clever enough to tell me how you condense everything we've just talked about into 20 seconds of chat as opposed to a fancy picture and a video, then so be it. But we're okay with that. We have an incrementally growing company. We're in a stable place, and we'll continue fighting the fight with the message that we have.
So you've sort of touched on an element there that I was going to pick up a bit later, but we'll jump it ahead. So you've got got to get this the right order, 5550 program that you've just started, which is to celebrate 50 years. Is it 5 continents? You're going to find 50 ambassadors.
Yeah, 50 year celebration was 5 countries. We were going to do 50 ambassadors in each, a set of 5 products at 50% discount. So we were looking at expanding our reach with a group of ambassadors to help us work through direct consumer growth in countries where we didn't have a retail network. And I say that very specifically because we pride ourselves in working with the retail trade. So in the UK, we have our greatest spread of retailers. We're in with a majority of anybody that you would recognize as a specialist. Pre-Brexit, we had a really, really established European network that's been compromised because of Brexit. So we've had to experiment with some direct consumer sales. So that's a blended approach in Europe. And then in some of the further flung countries where we have our own controlled representation, so Australia, South Africa, South America, those areas, it's very much a D2C approach. So we looked at targeting a certain number of countries, establishing 50 new ambassadors, getting new product in their hands, giving them a beneficial set of pricing. So kind of everybody wins. We get some promotion, we get people using good quality products, and can we push ourselves in some countries where we haven't necessarily been as strong as we would like. So yeah, that was the project that we established for this year, and it's been great. It's been a real challenge to get it up and running, and it's not probably delivered in all 5 countries that I would want as much, and some of that is timeline as much as anything else because seasons are in different places across the world, but pretty much probably 4 out of 5 I'm happy with where we are, and it's delivered what we were looking for. And it was just a different way of looking at how we promote and sell.
And when you're looking at the applications, not just for this, but for sponsorship, is there anything that you wish you could see more often in the applications? So people highlighting different aspects rather than just I play at this level.
So I get criticized quite a lot for the lead point on our company website about sponsorship, which is if you come here looking for some hockey shaped Santa Claus, please keep moving. Because what I find is the frustration of the open-handed, as in people coming to us with an open hand saying, please give me, please give me, please give me, that doesn't show, this is me being a grumpy old man, doesn't show an awareness of a two-way street. So yes, as a brand, we absolutely want to support people from Olympians at performance level going down through different performance levels themselves. And we want to support those journeys, but those journeys aren't necessarily based on performance. If you look at the number of people who play on the world stage in the next 3 weeks, will an individual in the country be able to tell me what stick specifically Jorik Kloon from the Netherlands is using? No. They'll be able to tell me what brand if they're a reasonable hockey badger, but in principle they won't, and he's probably going to be one of the most highest paid people in the world. So what is his influence on brand sales? That's a commercial discussion that lots of people can have. If on the other hand, I support a club coach who's never had any support from a brand before, but they come to me going, you know what? I coach 400 kids on a Sunday morning, and my local sports shop is owned by a mate of mine, and I can get 100 of those kids to go in that sports shop and buy Mercian sticks. Would you give me a stick? And would you give me a stick and give me a code that we can then track that sale? And if next year they've done 100, I've proved my worth. Can I have another stick? And I would immediately go to that and go, of course I would. You have just quantified your value. There is a fabulous journalist called Ross Bone who works independently now, has worked for the BBC as a goalkeeper. He came to me and asked for a set of goalkeeping kit, and he looked on the website and he went, it's £1,200 at retail price. And he wrote me a document that listed every single thing that he would do, and he put a value against it. And he added it all up, and funnily enough, it made 1,200 quid. But one of them was he would get a picture of a Mercian goalie bag on the BBC News red sofa. And he said, if I can do that, I think it's got 50 quid's worth of value. And that was part of his menu. And he delivered it in year one. And so when he came back and said, can we do it again? Of course we can. It's a no-brainer because there's a joined up value statement. I can help you with X, you help me with Y. And that's a fundamental thing that if people think through what they're asking for and what they can offer, just that thought process will show through in an application, and more often than not will get a positive response. I'm not interested if somebody goes, oh, I'm the captain of my under-14s, I've won 2 medals, give me a stick. Well, why? What are you going to help me do? Because you'll get a stick from somebody will give you a stick, but next year when you're bored of the color, you'll ask someone else for a different color stick because there's no relationship. And I believe in what I was brought up on. For the Mercian perspective, I was given my first set of kit at age 13. I never used anything different. And even now we sponsor players who we have a policy. Our sponsor program is black level sponsorship is Olympic level. And if you get black level, you get it forever. So I have people now who get 1 stick every 5 years, and I guarantee you they're giving it to somebody else. But they get a stick because they've always been with us, and it puts a Mercian stick in the hands of somebody who is a relation of an Olympian. And that holds massive value to me.
So the question I was asking was something that you just touched on is brands being identifiable. Talking about a hockey badger might know the brand that a player is using, but not the stick. Do you think hockey as a whole does enough to kind of spotlight the players to get that knowledge out? You think of in other sports, the prime example is always Michael Jordan with his Air Jordan shoes. Everyone knew what he was wearing. The only player I can really think of currently who you can say that about is Hendricks with his gold and white face stick.
The answer is I don't think that brands necessarily highlight the individual product of the individual player, but I'm also not sure it's overly relevant. And I say that because for brands to be identifiable, so let's continue to, we'll use the top recognized brands in the world, Addy, Grays, etc. That's recognizable by virtue of the number of players that there are on a pitch. So you've got a significant number of players, they all use 3-stripe sticks, or they use sticks with a little orange flash on them. Enough global awareness of that brand then exists. If you go beyond that critical mass, as I call it, then you're into a position where you're asking the question about what product is being used by an individual player. So unless then you are into Hendricks using his gold stick with a white face, you look at who else? I'm thinking about individual players. So can anybody know, even now, and I'm a bit of a hockey badger, I think Harmanpreet from India uses it. I'm going to say Flash. I think he uses Flash sticks, which is an Indian brand. You look at unique players, you go back to Ashley Jackson in the past, he used a Grays AJ7, but an AJ7 was a repainted Grays 55% carbon stick, so it kind of wasn't even an inline model. Zach Wallace uses a repainted Grays particular stick, I think it's a ZW, I forget what his number is, that's very bad of me. But I don't necessarily think there's any point in highlighting the player and the model. I think you highlight the player and the brand, and you create a critical mass of imagery and social media digital presence that then shows off your brand. And if people have brand awareness, then they will investigate product. I think it works better that way than looking at product awareness, unless you are someone like a Hendricks or a Sam Ward from a UK perspective. I'm sticking with the men's only because I've done my men's Olympic prep today, so it's all in my head. So Blake Govers, Felix Denea, what brands are they using and why? And you might look more interested into the specific model, but again, it's still brand awareness rather than product awareness. So I don't think commercially brands would invest that amount of time and money into individual product promotion. They promote the players, but you're talking about significant amounts of money in a not massive profit-driven economic market. None of the brand owners are driving Ferraris and living in castles. I'll tell you that for nothing.
No, a very good point. I was meaning more highlighting the player and the stick they use rather than a special edition model. But you have touched on something interesting, which is Felix Denea. He is co-owner of the brand that he is sponsored by, so he does have his own special edition, which I think is in partnership with Red Bull. Touching back on the conversation we had about Maddie Hinch's helmet, do you see more and more players going into those kind of brand partnership ownership schemes?
What do I see? I think there's two different ends to that spectrum. So if you look at someone like a Tanguy Cossens, for example, in Belgium, is he started brand, I don't know who he did it with, I think called, I'm going to say A-Life, something like that. So he was part of a startup brand. He used it. I think he owns it. It's never gone anywhere commercially other than probably being holiday money. So you bring in 100 sticks, sell 100 sticks, you make some money, go on holiday somewhere nice. Simple as that. It's really, really hard to start a brand and make it a commercial success. And what I mean by that is making enough money to have buildings and staff and sponsorship programs and all the stuff that goes with the boring stuff that goes with running a company. So transitioning from selling a few sticks to your mates out the boot of your car into something meaningful without any private backing. And that's where we go back to the Osaka comment of private backed company, venture capital, call it what you will, enables you to do something exciting, and then eventually the money comes back. If you then look at the Felix Denea model, what I believe has happened there is a relatively new company has generated quite a lot of digital interest pre Felix Denea around the UK, because it's a brand that comes out of Northern Ireland, and they had an identity. What the commercial value of that was, I don't know. The rumor in the market is that they have then signed away some ownership. I don't know how much ownership, whether it's all of it, some of it, half of it. I have no idea. Those figures aren't public. And he has seen the value of the brand. He's decided that rather than taking a big paycheck, because I'm pretty certain they wouldn't have been able to do the big paycheck size that a Felix Denea warrants, I don't think they'd be able to do that. Therefore, he's probably taken an ownership stake in the business. He's then helping to generate it. He's got a lot of his mates using those sticks, some fabulous players in the second half of their careers. You look at Sander Devine, for example, using the same brand. Really, really, really good quality people that are generating some sales. But he's also a trained lawyer. So I look at that and I go, okay, great for a period of time. If he wins a gold medal in Paris in 3 weeks' time, he might take a little bit of time off. But from a long-term career perspective, if you can be a lawyer, I would literally sit him down and counsel him against career path, trained lawyer, and what that can be in 25 years' time versus I'm going to sell hockey sticks for a living. I can happily tell him how hard selling hockey sticks is, and I think being a lawyer and the resources that come from that in the end, don't get me wrong, incredibly hard work, have to be incredibly talented. But my understanding of peer group people that I grew up with, those who went into careers in things such as law and accountancy and consulting and things have probably slightly better personal situations than trying to sell hockey sticks for a living. That's not a negative, it's a statement of fact.
No, I don't think anyone can really argue with you that in terms of future revenue, trained lawyer is going to out earn selling hockey sticks. So just because of the timing that we're doing this interview, I think we have to talk about the Olympics. You're again going to be part of the broadcast team. I have historically been quite critical of the way hockey is broadcast. And so I'd like to get your view on the hockey broadcast kind of from the other side. So do you think that hockey is broadcast in the best way for the sport?
Consistently, no. Consistently, no. And that is because hockey now is really, really hard to broadcast well. And the reason for that is it's a relatively small ball traveling at very high speeds in amongst 44 feet, or 40, 48 if you include the umpires. So 20, yeah, I get my maths right. Yeah, 22 people plus 2 umpires and then times it by 2. So it disappears. So you have to have multiple cameras with camera operators who understand the sport. So you can't just do what's called lock it off on a wide shot and show the whole pitch, because you'll never see any skills. You have to have camera operators who are confident enough to see a ball, identify a skill. You then have to have directors who understand the speed of the game and therefore putting replays into a relevant space. So if you've got someone, for example, coming from soccer where you've got between 60 and 90 seconds for a free kick at times, whereas with our self-pass thing, you've got maybe 2. But you get a director that comes from soccer, sees that here's the whistle, sees the stoppage, plays a replay, and then we're in and shooting at a time when you're playing out an 8-second replay because there's not an understanding of how long something takes. So we have a very complicated visual sport that has to be shown using very, very high tech, multiple cameras with knowledgeable operators. So it makes it difficult. If it is done well, and I'm going to use the Dutch company that I work for, so Southfields, which is part of the whole Eurohockey Southfields, EHL, Media Pro, and I'm getting company names wrong and I'll get criticised for not remembering them all exactly, but they know hockey and they are fundamentally the best broadcast group that I ever have the chance to work with. Amazing. There's camera operators there that I've known on site for 10 years, and they can follow a ball. And they know when someone does a disguised sliding slap, they don't pan the camera left because the ball's going right. They know exactly what is happening and they understand the dynamics. And then the directors who run that program are incredible. And that, I believe, and maybe you would agree or disagree, I think the EHL is consistently the best broadcast delivery method of sport, probably on the planet. And everything else pales into insignificance to a degree. You then, unfortunately, because of costs, you then scale back from a 8, 9, 10 camera, multiple angle video umpire replay scenario into 4 cameras, a director who doesn't know the sport, locked off wide settings, and you can't see the ball and the shadows in the wrong place, and it just becomes difficult to even follow the game. So is it consistently done as well as it should be? No, but finance resources is always going to come into play. So I think it is done well when it can be done well. I think we should push a little harder to make it better and maybe use some more modern technology around the games themselves. And as a commentary team, we're constantly having those conversations about, can we do player interviews? Can we get a little bit of bench insight? Can we do some pre-game, post-game, whatever that looks like, for people who enjoy role models and heroes and figureheads? Can we do that? How much better could it be? I think it's difficult to make it better without having quite a lot more budget.
And how difficult does that difference in the broadcast make your job as the commentator? Obviously, you're not watching what is on screen. necessarily. I don't know your setup. Maybe you have a screen in front of you so you can glance at it to see what's being shown. But the differentiation between the EHL, which I would definitely agree is probably the best broadcast hockey there has been for the past 8 years at least, when you go into things like the World Cup or the Olympics.
So when I commentate, two different things. You commentate live, obviously you're on the side of a pitch, and what you're watching live, but what you are seeing is what is on the screen that's in front of me. So constantly the commentary team have to be looking live pictures and screen. So you're almost multitasking, because when a replay comes up on your screen, I have to know that the words that we're putting out matches the replay, not matches the action that I'm looking at behind the screen. So it's understanding that, and the best directors and producers, we will have a headset on while we're commentating, and the director will then go replay, roll green, roll blue, and that means the replay is going to play. So when you hear that command, he is talking about the pictures changing, and it gives you an audible cue to the screen changing. So you're trying to link the words that you have to the pictures that you as a viewer would see. So when you're in a live commentary position, you've got 2 or 3 different inputs: producer, screen, and live imagery. When you do some Pro League, for example, if it's coming from China, they wouldn't fly us to China to do live. We would be doing it in a studio in London. So all we are doing is talking to a picture. As I'm talking to you now on screen, I would be talking to that picture in exactly the same way, and I'm seeing it at the same time that you are seeing it. So my only cues are what is on the screen in front of me, and we're trying to put words to it, albeit we have the audible cues, we have the directors, because it is live pictures. The worst case scenario is when we are simply doing essentially voiceover work. So they'll send us a set of pictures, or they'll send us a feed, and you press play and you record audio over the top of that feed, and you just are, whatever turns up, you have to try and make sense of it and give clean audio breaks and various things to allow that to happen, and to try and make a program from what's on the screen.
This is something that we have spoken about historically, going back as far as Field Hockey Forum. Do you think that hockey would benefit from having an analysis either wrap up at the end of, for example, a Pro League, or just a general analysis show? So be akin to Match of the Day, something like that, where you could control the footage, you could talk through interesting elements of the game.
Yes, full stop. I think, and it is a conversation that we as the commentary team are having with the hockey powers, about the fact that, if, to give an example, if we are on site, so we were at the Hockey Fives World Cup in Oman in January, and because of the nature of the competition, there was limited time around the games because they ran very, very concurrently. But there was 2 teams of us, so there was 4 of us out there, because there were 16 games a day, which meant that we had 4 people on site. It wouldn't have been difficult, in my opinion, to give us, because we watched maybe 6 games, to give us the roving camera. There was a roving camera. Give us a roving camera, go and stand us with a pitch or a mountain or a desert as a backdrop, and ask us to have a little head-to-head interview about the 5 games that have happened, or the 5 games that are going to come. Or Sander Devine is leading the Netherlands team. They've withdrawn from the Hockey Fives World Cup in future. Why might that be? Can we go and grab him and do a quick 60-second pop-up? So I believe wholeheartedly that that is the production that we should be trying to create. And that, if I go back to the pictures of the sport, are difficult and expensive to put out there. It is not difficult or expensive to get a couple of people who know what they're talking about in front of a camera with a couple of stick microphones to have a 3-minute conversation. And the proof of that is that I have decided, tiny little bit of personal plug, that I'm going to do some stuff from Paris. I've put some stuff out today on my own Instagram. So it's not a company thing, it's not corporate, it's just having conversations. I've done 4 pool analysis little snippets that will come out in the next 4 days, and then once I'm there, I've lined up only 3 to 5 minute little pieces head to head with some interesting people. I'll do something with Kate Richardson-Walsh. I'll do something with Charlie Broom, who I've done lots of commentary with. I'm going to try and touch base with Marcus Hoffman, who's the new Euro Hockey president. Jana Muller-Wieland is going to do some stuff. Hopefully Moritz Förster. Tone de Neuer said possibly. Jamie Dwyer said possibly. So a lot of people that have massive hockey knowledge who will watch some games and then have a comment. And it'll be a comment about what's coming today, what happened yesterday. Wasn't the Australia shock result lost to whatever? If you're asking Jamie, I'll see if I can stitch him up. But yeah, I think there is a lot of stuff around the game that could easily be added to if there was a little window to do it. And I think that can come back to even club streaming. So club streaming, quite often the actual hockey bit isn't great because of the nature of, again, finance and camera work, but it's not difficult to put a locked off camera shot with a couple of people, you and I having a chat. We could turn up and do Old George and Surbiton head to head quite easily, talking down a team list and who's going to be interested, etc. That doesn't take a set of professional skills that needs training. That just takes a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of enthusiasm, a bit of energy at the top and the middle and the end of the show to add value that people would then listen to. So I think there's some work that can be done, but that isn't a high ticket item. That is just a bit of passion and knowledge.
I would agree with that. I think that could be a really interesting discussion to tune into. If you can get all of those guests on for 5 minutes to talk about something. How important do you think the quality of the highlight packages are, especially around major tournaments like the Olympics that we're about to go into, where I think in the group stages, there's about 20 hours of hockey per day for the group stages?
Massively important based on the way that we consume data, digital input, whatever that may be, whatever the right words are, now is so varied. And we go from the concentration spans of a younger person who you might be lucky to get 60 seconds of concentration into the older people such as myself who still use Facebook and are happy to listen to 5 minutes, 10 minutes of chatter from the likes of me on a highlights package. I think because of the nature of how time poor we are as people these days, and life is fast moving, etc. Therefore, to have a short form version of the sport that we're watching is massively valuable, and cutting it into highlights and show reels and super skills and fantastic saves and tackles and passes is massively valuable, because it simply means there is another set of media that portrays our sport, the sport that I love, keeping it personally, the sport that I love, into a really busy world sporting stage. And we have to be up there with, what's there going to be? There's going to be 3-on-3 basketball, there's going to be speed climbing, there's break dancing, for crying out loud, of the Olympics. I mean, we're facing massive challenges from other entities. I'm not going to call them sports necessarily, but other entities that will pull people's focuses in different directions. And we've got to be right up there. We've got to be considering what is the new media format. I'll take it a little bit back to our company perspective, is we've got to be really certain about what we're trying to deliver. Otherwise, you can get pulled into about 57 different directions, and social media is a pit of options, opportunity and distraction. So let's make sure we know what we're trying to do. If we're trying to do one thing, let's do it well. Let's not spread ourselves too thin. But if we get those priorities right and we understand what our competitive base is, then the principle of creating a lot of content is hugely valuable and very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you on that. I have been more than a little bit negative about the highlight packages that have been out around some major tournaments. There are some that very much seem to be generated by someone pressing a button in the production facilities that just takes kind of the last 30 seconds, commentary and all. And so you get people cut off mid-sentence, or the highlight starts and they're halfway through a word. And it is one of the most infuriating things to see, kind of the low effortness of some of the highlight packages that come out. So we'll look to wrap things up because I've taken quite a lot of your time already. So I always like to finish up with a question around having a blank check to go out and sign anyone you want in the world of hockey at this minute in time. Going into the Olympics is absolutely premium time. You can go and write a check, give it to any player to move them across to Mercian. Whose name are you putting on the check?
Oh, there's a question. Who would I put? I would pick Xander Vaart from the Netherlands. Netherlands women's captain, just because. So commercially, 2 or 3 different reasons. I think that women right now, my perception, and I apologize in advance if I get the words wrong. I don't mean any offense to anybody. I think that women have a far greater identification of their own role models. And I think strong women role models right now, where we are society wise, is a really important point. So someone like her, who's someone, I don't know if she's the captain going in, I haven't looked at my notes on that, but someone who is one of the most senior players in the Netherlands squad. She's recognised as World Player of the Year, just genuinely incredibly good. She's an inspiring speaker. She's motivating to the people around her. And then coldly and commercially, she exists in the highest value commercial market in the world. So if I look at it from with those 2 hats on, if I want to sell more hockey sticks, I need to be selling them in that marketplace. And if I want to pick a player who has the greatest impact, it would be her. There's several in the men's side, but I don't think men relate to men in the same way. So I think that female role model perspective is far more valuable. And I think she is simply an inspirational human being that would positively impact on our company.
It's an excellent answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll wrap things up here. Thank you very much for your time.
You're more than welcome. It's been a delight to chat. Happily come back at any point where you've got a spare couple of hours to chew the fat.